let's talk about the MJF CM Punk story. So MJF's motivation starts with all the interviews that he's doing. The Ariel Helwani interview, the Barstool interview, the stuff that he was doing outside of the character work that's happening on TV, where he's talking about being fed up with the company, where he's talking about wanting to make more money, where he's talking about how much other people are getting paid. That's all happening presumably out of character in interviews, not on TV. And it's an important distinction that we're led to believe there's a separate on-screen and off-screen narrative. Because when the off-screen narrative takes the place of the on-screen narrative, all of a sudden, the story becomes totally different. The story becomes real. The story, not the motivation of MJF, but the story of CM Punk and MJF, to me, actually starts with the Adam Page CM Punk promo before Double or Nothing. Adam Page calls out the reality of what's happening with CM Punk. AEW is clearly evolving as a company, and CM Punk is the face that's replacing the Elite as the symbol for what AEW is. In this back and forth, in the short term, Punk is set up to be the top guy, the babyface, but in the long term, he's clearly being set up to be a major villain. Even as a good guy, every time CM Punk brings up AEW and all the talent that they have, he really only brings up Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley. He only brings up his fellow former WWE superstars. This is a stark change from what Punk was doing when he first got to AEW. Moreover, as CM Punk came out to announce that he was injured on Friday and that he was taking time off, the story was still being told. Is the injury a work? That's not the question. Is the injury real or not? Whatever. Is it part of the story? Yes. CM Punk's red eyes and crocodile tears were far more reminiscent of Shawn Michaels losing his smile than Daniel Bryan being forced to retire. And CM Punk's not retiring. He's out with an injury. I mean, it's not good news, but it's not life-shattering. He'll be back. Furthermore, who did CM Punk mention as potential AEW champions to take his place? Danielson and Moxley only. Not Hangman, certainly not MJF, not Omega, not even Eddie Kingston. He suggested WWE guys as his replacement for AEW champion. But that's not the most important part of the promo. The most important part was the most confusing part. The fact that CM Punk is not relinquishing the title. Now, because CM Punk is not a villain yet, he made it clear that he was willing to give it up. However, AEW President Tony Khan has decided he wants Punk to remain champion, even though Punk can't work. The highest paid person on the roster, who wants opportunities to go to other members of the Millionaires Club, gets to continue to be paid and be the champion while he sits home recovering. This is literally the character that the CM Punk of old fought against. This is 1996, Tell Me a Lie, Shawn Michaels. This is 1993, WrestleMania 9, Hulk Hogan. This is movie star Rock in 2013 winning the WWE Championship from CM Punk. So if CM Punk is now that guy, who is the new CM Punk? Adam Page? Kenny Omega? No. Not the talent that was brought into AEW to be the main event. Certainly not. It would have to be the talent that became the main event organically, the way CM Punk did. Who truly became undeniable in AEW? Could it be a spoiled rich kid from Long Island is the new voice of the voiceless? Could the best in the world be replaced by I'm better than you and you know it? This is where the foundation of MJF being built off screen is key. On screen, MJF was making a star out of Wardlow. Off screen, he was making it clear that he was not valued by the powers that be. When MJF didn't show up to his autograph signing 10 days ago, the off screen became the on screen. When word got out to the wrestling journalists that MJF had booked a flight out of Las Vegas on Saturday night, even though no evidence of such a flight was ever presented publicly, and MJF stayed on the West Coast for days after the pay-per-view, it changed the narrative of Sunday's on-screen MJF. Not one person watching Double or Nothing hadn't heard about the MJF controversy. And will MJF show up was the conversation heading into a pay-per-view that featured CM Punk possibly and probably capturing the AEW World title in the main event. This continues to play into MJF being undervalued, even going in to Double or Nothing. MJF being carried out on a stretcher after the match with Wardlow satisfies two levels of storytelling. Firstly, it puts over Wardlow as a monster. And that was clear watching Dynamite on Wednesday with the fans' response. Secondly, it gives fans watching, for the second level of storytelling, the impression that MJF is being written off the show, playing back into the no-show autograph signing and the leaving Las Vegas rumors. Going as far as MJF and AEW have turned MJF into a rebel. So what exactly is he fighting against? Well, in the past, a pipe bomb promo has helped clarify just that. So why not do it again? MJF's promo on Dynamite was magnificent and had CM Punk's fingerprints all over it in the best possible way. While Adam Page's promo might have reflected fans' perception of what some in the locker room might be thinking, MJF went further. Citing the emphasis on former WWE stars might have reflected some of our perception on the AEW locker room's feelings. But what Maxwell did was draw from the critics of AEW that we are all exposed to online. Through podcasts and social media, MJF was able to take from the anti-AEW voice to add to what we see as realism. Calling Tony Khan a, quote, mark, making it seem like Tony Khan was unfit to run a wrestling promotion. This is all stuff that we've heard before, but never from an AEW wrestler, and certainly never on AEW TV. AEW took several steps further. They did not acknowledge the promo. They did not air CM Punk coming out to confront MJF, but they knew cell phone footage would leak from the arena. They took down MJF's merchandise, unfollowed him on social, and didn't put his promo on YouTube. Why? Because it's exactly what WWE did to Naomi and Sasha Banks 2 weeks ago. It's the precedent that was set for us fans to interpret what would happen if a star truly went against the company. It's what we were just taught. Furthermore, what happened after the MJF promo? What was the very next segment? A match between Johnny Elite and Miro, formerly known as John Morrison and Rusev. They followed the promo about favoring ex-WWE guys with a match between ex-WWE guys. And they didn't even acknowledge the irony. This is modern pro wrestling storytelling. WWE's Summer of Punk was Ring of Honor's Summer of Punk flipped on its head. AEW's Summer of Punk is actually the Summer of MJF. There's only one way to go from here. CM Punk will end up as a villain, MJF as a hero. When CM Punk won the title, his record in AEW said 19-1. Who is the one? MJF. MJF is the only person that has beaten CM Punk. So how far back does all of this truly go? When did it become a work? We will probably never know, nor should we. From his first day, CM Punk claimed he was in AEW to help make bigger stars. If that's the case, this may be his masterpiece. This story is going to make the first MJF CM Punk story look like paint by numbers. Their first story, good as it was traditional professional wrestling. It was comfortable. Even when it got quote unquote real, we knew where it was going. This one is different. This one has everyone asking what's real and what's not. This one is new kayfabe. New kayfabe is something I've been talking about on this podcast for a year and a half. Wrestling fans want to be tricked. As much as we want to be on the inside, we want even more to have the wool pulled over our eyes. We want to get lost in the stories being told, but we're not willing to pretend we're stupid. We're not willing to have our intelligence insulted. Wrestling fans know what we're watching. At this point, we've most likely been doing so for many, many years. Not only that, but the entire history of mainstream American wrestling is available to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for the cost of a cup of coffee. But we're information hungry. We're starving. And there's more information out there than ever. Between social media accounts, internet wrestling reporters, podcasters, handsome as they may be, YouTubers, documentaries, and TV, there's exponentially more wrestling information out there and actively being consumed than ever before, by a lot. Many fans know so many intricate details of things that aren't on television, and information is passed so quickly on such a scale that the idea of tricking this audience is ludicrous. Instead, what we see often are wrestling storylines that we know are clearly storylines, being appreciated by fans. Instead of cheering good guys and booing bad guys, we're applauding the team that came together to create this play for us. It's enjoyable, it's comfortable, it's familiar, until, that is, something comes along and disrupts our peace and leaves us asking, is that real? New kayfabe is not about cutting promos on TV and making you believe in a gimmick. It's about acknowledging and utilizing the tools of a vastly changed world. Fans' perception of superstars can be incredibly altered by what they perceive is going on off screen. A wrestler can declare something on television in character, but if we've heard they're being an asshole behind the scenes, or they're being pushed too hard by the boss, or they don't want to be working for a company anymore, whatever character work they do on screen simply may not be effective. We've already made up our minds based on off-screen stories. Wrestling has evolved into a very strange art form. Fans do not believe what they see on TV is real. But if they read it on the internet, or they hear it in an interview from a wrestler who sounds even slightly different than they do on television, we will believe it's real. The first example of this is probably Brett and Shawn in 1997. Backstage news had been leaked across message boards and email newsletters, and it made their Survivor Series 97 match something very different from what it was when it started. But that tradition continues all the way up to today, and Roman Reigns, whose current character is really a response to the fact that fans didn't like the old one because they thought he was being pushed too hard. New kayfabe is all about taking advantage of that, allowing certain stories to leak to news sites, knowing it will change the audience's perception, giving quotes during interviews that sound behind the scenes that will make people feel differently about the subject of the interview when they appear on television. Gone are the days when good guys and bad guys would drive in different cars. But here are the days when a story is leaked about the bad blood behind the scenes between two competitors gearing up for a match. Gone are the days of retirement match stipulations, but here are the days of wrestlers giving interviews claiming that their days of wrestling may be winding down. Does that mean that all of these news stories and interview quotes are made up? No, they aren't lies. Or maybe they are. It truly doesn't matter. Whether you create a story based on real events or you create, quote, real events to base a story on, it's all the same. It's the story. It's time to stop asking what's real and what's not. As fans with the internet at our fingertips, we should be digging. We should be consuming. Every piece of content is ours for the taking. But when even after all of that, we don't know what's real and what's not, we should do our ultimate job as fans. We should be worked. If we as hardcore wrestling fans can be worked in 2022, let's be worked. There is no real. There is no fake. There's just the story. And a good story can work any of us.